Hello and welcome to the show. Don't you just love this time of the year? Summer is just around the corner, the garden's pumping, and Gardening Australia is on the telly, giving you all the know-how to get productive in your patch. So here's your dose of inspiration for this week.
I'm going to show you a few simple strategies you can implement now to help prepare your garden to beat the heat.
I'm meeting a gardener who found that moving house has meant coming to terms with a very different set of gardening conditions.
It's time for an audit. Not your tax, your pot plants. I'm working through all of my collection to work out what needs attention and what needs a new home.
And we get a sneak peek of somewhere special. A tropical paradise filled with stunning plants and people. Every garden tells a story, depending on where it is, what's growing, and how it nurtures and supports everyone in it. Well, this communal garden has more stories than most, because it's an important part of Eb's house.
Eb's house is a crisis accommodation for men and women over the age of 18 on the lower North Shore Northern Beaches. So here we have 25 rooms available. They're all self-contained, and their occupancy agreement with Mission Australia usually runs between 3 to 6 months. The clients work with the case managers here to successfully transition into sustainable housing.
So who's staying here?
Men and women that have been faced with unemployment, mental health issues, clients that have fallen on challenging times. More recently, we're seeing men and women that are employed and have families that are finding they can't keep up with the rent increases in the private rental market, and they're coming here looking for support and I guess some hope that we can assist and navigate them through potentially them being at risk of homelessness.
I was a builder, and the wheel sort of fell off. I got divorced, walked away from it, and I walked a bit too far. I ended up an heroin addict, which eventually led me to next door, which Mission's all about. I was homeless, right? But I wasn't completely helpless. I'm not that sort of a guy. So I saw the grass was long and I just said, have you got a lawnmower? And I'd mow the grass, and they found out I was a builder, so I put the roof on the chicken shed and do things around here, you know, this, that and the other, just to pay back in.
The communal garden provides a vital interactive outdoor space for Eb's house clients. They're guided by Phil Pettit, Community Greening Manager with the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney.
We work with people living in social housing all across New South Wales to help them to grow community gardens or communal garden spaces. We've been doing this for about 20 years and we're funded by Department of Communities and Justice. It's an outreach education program, so we co-design and co-build wherever practical with people living in social housing, also Aboriginal and remote communities as well. So we really help provide a social and therapeutic horticultural space for people to engage and connect in, and also then we're delivering the ability to grow their own food or flowers, brighten up their space and really empower them to be in charge and in control of their own gardening space. We only work with people. We don't just turn up and say we're going to build a garden. We work with them to create that space. It's very important that it's led by the people at the centre of the project. Oil, bit of salt and pepper. Salt and pepper, even some herbs or something on that would just be magic.
So how was the garden set out?
So we set it out so there was plenty of space for people to walk between and any wheelchair accessibility, and also raised up nice and high so that, you know, people who've got a lot of, you know, health concerns, they don't have to bend down and they can access these garden beds really easily. These are wicking garden beds as well, so they're low water use, and so that helps them to be successful and to stay alive.
the pallets, it's a really simple design.
So one of the corporate working bees, they constructed these out of recycled materials, and it's a great way to keep and define the space, but also to keep our chooks there from getting into the garden and eating everything. So they still manage to get in from time to time.
You've had to put version number 2 to keep the chickens out.
And I think razor wire might be next, but I think there's a happy balance. We've got some covers, things like that. Beautiful chooks here that are recycling food scraps. Rubbish from the house goes through here, and the chooks are feeding us breakfast.
Now, this is an interesting little wedge, but it's been made really productive.
So we found that this was sort of a disused corner of the garden here, and so we wanted to make use of this space and create a food forest. And if we rinse it off, you can have a try.
The volunteers meet up every month.
I love coming out here and just plucking around and having a look, water in them, and actually seeing it all grow. Yeah, it's really good. Good for the mind.
I think it's very important. It helps with people having something to do to ground themselves, you know? It's a way to come back to nature, not be so caught in consuming on what life is really about. Have something that is natural and away from what has probably brought them into Eb's house. And I think that is a great thing to have for anyone who's going through anything like what the people in Eb's house deal with.
It can be hard for people to feel in touch with nature because they're always in touch with technology and science and everything like that. You just can't get somewhere out with nature. Good thing I came here today.
Yeah.
I'm in a really good form.
With that nice coir mixed in there, that'll be perfect for these greens. So I thought, you know, a nice mix of Asian greens. That's a Mizuna,
Right.
Nice and peppery and spicy. That's a Mibuna, slightly different leaf.
Yeah, more long.
But yeah, but they grow really well. It'll love it here. It's going to get some nice light. And then we've got tatsoi as well. So there's 3 different varieties of Asian greens that we can spread out in this bed.
Oh, wonderful. Looks good too.
Yeah. Take that off.
Try it.
Give it a try. Tell me what you think. Is the pepper kicking in?
Not yet. Oh, yeah, it's something.
Sweat's driven.
Phil often runs workshops about things like harvesting and cooking produce, bush foods and chicken care. But today, it's all about the bees.
Having these native stingless bees here in this garden, it'll increase the pollination. So that means when we plant cucumbers, we'll get more cucumbers from the flowers, more fruits will form. And then for the people, they are going to get to witness bees coming in and out. It's like having a pet that you really don't have to care for. So they're very autonomous. They don't need any interference or specialised skill. You just need to watch them there and let them do their thing.
What do you love most about your work?
Housing people, transitioning them out of Eb's house, the satisfaction of seeing people happy and out of the crisis, out of the trauma state, and then being able to offer post-crisis support is what makes everything worth doing.
There's people there that end up falling by the wayside and they need to be picked up. You can't leave them behind. You got to bring them along with you.
How easy is it to attach a bromeliad to a tree? Well, super easy, actually. Bromeliads are naturally epiphytic, so they're found growing on trees. To attach them, simply place it against a tree and use an old stocking to secure it. You can also use cloth ties or any material that's stretchy. And snip off any excess. It'll take about 6 months for the roots to take hold, and it'll look like this. Easy peasy.
Do all fig fruit contain dead wasps? Well, maybe. There's over 800 species of figs. Not all of them are edible. But one thing they have in common is spherical flowers which are inverted. The fig wasps climb inside, they reproduce, and in that life cycle, they pollinate the figs. But if you grow a fig tree outside of its natural environment, where the fig wasps don't occur, then they won't be present in the fruit. This one, Ficus heniana, is delicious, makes a great jam. And where it lives here in Brisbane, its fig wasps are present, and they will be in the fruit. So just regard the wasps as a protein bonus.
A really common question I've had this year is, why are my cucumbers not producing a good crop? I'm getting lots of babies, but no big ones. Well, cucumbers are like all of the cucurbit family in that they produce both male and female flowers. And many of the modern varieties that are sold have been bred to be really productive in that they almost throw exclusively female flowers. You can see the flower here and the little cucumber at the base. That's a female. Now, they are really productive, but if you don't have another variety nearby, which is also providing the male flower, the pollen, you won't get pollination and you won't get cucumbers. So you must ensure that you are planting a diverse range of cukes and you'll get a good crop.
All plants are great, but some are absolute heroes, and Salviolacantha is one of them. It's tough and adaptable, totally beautiful, and an absolute magnet for so many of the beneficial insects we all rely on. And it's super simple to propagate. Soft stem cuttings will strike quickly, anytime from spring through to mid-autumn. But you can also lift and divide. This is better done in the milder months, anytime from early autumn all the way through to spring. Cut the old stems back to the new growth, but don't worry if you cut a few of the new shoots, they'll bounce straight back. Using a sharp spade, slice cleanly around the plant and then lift the whole thing up from the ground. Look at that root, amazing. You can pop it in a barrow or bucket of water to wash off a little soil and reduce shock. So you can see lots of new shoots popping up with that white stem. That's what you want. You can also see underneath there's substantial root options. There's a couple of main ones and lots of baby ones as well. And with your secateurs or spade, slice straight down to separate the single plant into a few. You need a good representation of both shoots and roots on each new plant. Some can be planted straight back into the garden, and others can be potted up to give away. Water well and keep up the love for the first few months, until the new plants are growing strongly. By keeping some of these powerhouse plants in your patch and propagating even more, you can keep those flowers pumping for you and all your garden visitors.
If you're looking for a grevillea with a softer flower shape, choose the Kiri grevillea. This hardy small shrub is well worth growing for its show-stopping floral display. Most grevilleas have adapted to harsher climates by growing tough, wiry or spiky flowers. But this one is an exception. It's a big softie. It's got wheel-like clusters of soft, scarlet flowers. And they grow in pairs and attract birds from winter to spring. And this slender, upright shrub grows to 1 to 2 metres and responds well to a light prune. Growing naturally in the southwest corner of WA, it will handle full sun, part shade and even a mild frost. Planted in sandy soil that has good drainage, but don't allow it to dry out. An excellent plant for informal borders, soft hedging, or a standalone shrub. This is stunning.
One thing's for sure, it's heating up out here. But Sophie's got some great tips to help you keep your garden chilled this summer. I'm feeling cooler already.
patch is best described as Mediterranean, with constant seasonal swings between wet, frosty winters and hot, dry summers. Over time, I've learned how these seasonal changes affect my garden, and I've learned to be prepared. I find working with the shapes of the land and the natural processes of plants gets the best results. When it comes to beating the heat, plants have developed their own strategy through a process called transpiration. They pull water up through their roots and stems, and it's released as vapour through tiny holes in the leaves called stomata. This helps nutrients move around the plant, and the vapour helps keep the plants cool, just like we cool down by sweating in the summer sun. So it comes as no surprise to anyone that in the heat, plants need water. But there are many aspects as to how, when, and with what we water that will help your plants to beat the heat. Most plants are robust and adaptable. They transform minerals in the soil into growth and make their own natural insect defence when nutrients are available. But in a dry spell, those nutrients get locked in the soil. Without sufficient water, plants struggle to grow strong and can be a magnet for pests and diseases. A little water goes a long way for a plant, so use it wisely. You can increase how water permeates into your soil surface by creating rills and hills around your garden beds or your plants. Rills are small-scale swales which allow the water to slow down and slowly infiltrate around the roots of your plants. Watering in the morning when the soil is still cool and shaded allows the water to seep in before it has a chance to evaporate. If plants expect to be watered in the middle of the day and that becomes inconsistent, it may cause them to wilt. Plan to be an early bird when it comes to fertilising your plants. If using liquid fertiliser, make sure that it's appropriately diluted, applied early in the morning and on well-watered soil. Avoid feeding in really hot weather. If you're going to use pelletised organic fertiliser, which is slower release, the same applies. Apply it to well-watered soil and make sure that you water it in really well before covering it with mulch. It's natural to expect some casualties in hot, dry weather, so be prepared to sacrifice thirsty, end-of-season, low-value plants back into the soil. Simply cut at the base to leave the roots in the soil to retain the soil structure and lay the foliage over the bed for a free breakdown mulch that makes the most of the nutrients. Taking cuttings is another way to save summer strugglers. It's a good backup plan, as you can always start again. Either way, the more the merrier. Placing water stations around your garden supports local fauna. Just like us, mammals, lizards and many insects need a drink, so you can make a hydration station using a shallow saucer placed near some of the plants that support your pollinators. Simply put stones or glass pebbles in it and fill it with water and support them, and they'll love you for it. The pebbles and glass marbles act as a landing pad because honeybees and some other insects can't swim. Another way to avoid the risk of drowning is to drape a rag out of a bird bath. The bees can either use it as a bridge or suck moisture through the fabric, but either way, they'll love a cool place to rest and they're more likely to hang around and pollinate. The key to gardening success in the dry weather is simple. Design your garden so the bulk of the plants are adapted to your local climate, and that way they'll survive without supplementary watering. But when it does come to the plants you choose to water, grow less well. Choose your star performers when it comes to veggies and your long-term specimens like fruit trees. And if you do have any dainty plants that need extra TLC, transfer them to a pot and put them close to your house where you can keep an eye on them. I like to use self-watering pots for my special plants. So focus on the plants that you can manage by being intentional with your watering regime, and don't forget the fauna. This will increase your chances of success and help you and your plants beat the heat.
There are so many handheld tools out there that it can be a bit overwhelming to choose the right ones for your garden. So I'm going to take you through a few options and show you how to use and care for them. A sickle is a cutting tool with a curved blade. It might remind you of a scythe, a bigger version used in some traditional agriculture. This smaller version is designed to move the blade parallel to the ground, sweeping horizontally to slash small amounts of plants quickly and with little force. It's especially useful for cutting down grasses, weeds, or harvesting grains. Cut close to the ground where the stems are tougher and less bendy. This makes it easier to cut and control movement. It can take a bit of practice to get it right, so don't try to cut too much at once. Use one hand to take hold of the bunch while you cut with the other hand, and always make sure to pull the blade away from your legs. This is a hori-hori knife designed in Japan. It does a job of many other tools. It's an all-in-one digging, weeding, cutting and planting tool. If your garden is short on storage space or you just have a small patch, this is a great option for you. The blade is sharp and slightly curved, so you can dig small holes for planting seedlings and tube stock. You can also slice through and dig up weeds and take on small pruning jobs. It is very sharp, so be sure to wear sturdy gloves, keep all your limbs and fingers out of the way, and store and carry in a holder. A foldable pruning saw is one tool that's really hard to beat if you grow lots of fruit trees and woody shrubs. It makes light work of branches and stems that are too thick for secateurs but don't quite need a chainsaw. Most saws only cut on the pull stroke, so don't try to force the push because you'll just be putting unnecessary energy into it and potentially damaging the teeth. Move slowly and don't rush it. If it's sharp enough and the branch isn't too thick for your saw, it'll cut through quickly. To maintain these tools, all blades need to be properly cleaned after every use. This will prolong their life and ensure no diseases spread between plants. Dislodge any bark or other plant matter after use. Wear gloves and use an old toothbrush or scrubber to clean the saw teeth. Remove excess dirt and plant material and wipe down with diluted metho or detergent. Finally, wipe over with some vegetable oil as rust prevention and to keep moving parts working well. So, if you treat your handheld tools with care and respect, they'll return the favour with years of faithful service out in the garden.
Moving house can be a challenge for gardeners. Moving state, even more so. Moving country, well, that's probably the steepest learning curve of them all. But a love of gardening and a willingness to work hard will always triumph. Josh has found someone who's taken up this challenge, and the results will have you hungry for more.
Imagine you're a gardener whose entire experience has been built in one place. Then you move to a new location where summer temperatures are a full 10 degrees hotter and rainfall around half of what you're used to. Holly Noakes grew up in the Northland region near the top of New Zealand's North Island, where she learned the fundamentals of gardening. Whilst it's the warmest part of the country, it's mild compared to her new home here in Perth, where she has set up a suburban garden that is now pumping out homegrown produce.
So my grandparents grew food, my parents grew food, and I have been pretty much in the garden since I was born. My parents had a quarter-acre block and were pretty self-sufficient, so every house I've lived at, I've always wanted to grow my own food. I did do a permaculture course. That's really helped me, I guess, adjust to growing in a different style and coming up with my own style that works here in Perth.
And what have you applied from your permaculture course to your garden here?
A lot of layering and sort of the food forest style gardens, growing edible ground covers, growing perennials as well. That was probably one of the main things, so that the plants have their roots in the ground longer, they're more established, and they can handle these hot summers.
But I see you're still growing a range of annuals, so
Yeah.
you still find them handy as well?
Yep. Annuals are really good for quick-growing crops, and they produce a lot of food. And I can also mix it up each season, so I'm not, stuck growing the same thing. I collect a lot of my own seed, but I do like to let things go to seed in the garden beds, and that way the seeds stay dormant in the soil until it's time to regrow, and then I get free plants popping up and I don't have to do anything.
So you're trying to reduce the amount of work you have to do?
Yes, and it's working really well. Those lettuces are all self-sown.
And how about these structures? Have you built these?
My partner built these for me, actually, and it's going to be a grape arbor. But for now, while the grapes are still establishing, I'm going to grow lots of annuals, some cucuzza, things like that to provide shade for these gardens in summer. Where I grew up in Northland in New Zealand, we get lots of rain. I feel like things just grow by themselves. I don't really have to do too much. And here it felt quite forced, and it was more like a struggle to keep things alive. The summers here every year still get me. It's so hot, it's so dry, and you really have to be prepared.
And what's the story with these fantastic raised beds?
These are mainly my kitchen garden beds. I do a lot of quick-growing crops, a lot of things I can just get 1 or 2 leaves from because it is so close to my kitchen. They're pretty quick and inexpensive to set up, and I can move them in and out of the sun in the shade, so that really helped me combat that summer heat and that sun. I move them in under cover during that time. And also this is a driveway, so it makes it easy to use if we need to, get a car down here, we can move them in and out. So this is my food forest style garden, and I have a lot of fruit trees and layering with edible ground covers, perennial shrubs, and some really hardy fruit trees. So this one is my strawberry guava, and I have a white mulberry, a Hawaiian guava, a pomegranate, and my favourite, which is the feijoa.
Great selection of really climate-suitable trees here. And also, I love the layering approach. What kind of understory plantings are you growing?
So I have sweet potato, nasturtium, and I have some middle layer things, which are the Queensland arrowroot, which is sort of like a substitute for potato, perennial.
You've clearly learnt loads since gardening here in Perth, and I understand that you're quite active in sharing those learnings with others.
Yes, I make videos, and I love inspiring others to grow their own food at home as well.
And you've got the hang of gardening in Perth now. What does it give back to you?
I love seeing all the wildlife coming to my garden and being able to experiment and try new things, and my garden is a great place to do that.
So there's parts of the garden that are really intensive. We've seen the front yard, those great planter boxes, and of course your back fence here with the food forest area. What's next? There's still plenty of space.
Yes, there's so many opportunities to grow more and keep expanding my gardens. I'm pretty lucky with the amount of space I've got.
Well, I reckon you're going to do great, and I can't wait to see how it turns out.
Thank you.
Still to come on Gardening Australia, Jane shares some of her favourite trees. Jerry introduces us to some terrific, showy, warm climate perennials. And we take you to a surprise tropical destination to enjoy a garden full of amazing botanical delights.
Growing plants in pots can be so useful in the garden. But have yours seen better days? Well, Millie's here to show you how to whip them back into shape.
grow all sorts of plants in containers, and for me, they give me such a great opportunity to grow a really big range of species. This is Apocynaceae filler. It's one of my favourite Australian plants, and it is adapted to a really harsh, dry climate just outside of Perth in Western Australia. Hot, dry, well-drained soil. That's what it wants in nature. But I live in a cool climate and I have a heavy clay soil underneath me. So by growing it in a container, I can create the perfect conditions for this plant to thrive. And of course, you can always grow food in pots. A bay tree by the back door means you've always got a leaf to pick and chuck in a soup. But plants growing in containers aren't all set and forget. In fact, they can be quite a bit of work. So every few months, I like to work through my whole collection and do a pot plant audit. I look at what's growing really well, what might need a little bit of work, and what might need a whole change of scenery. First, do they need a feed? When you contain a plant in a pot, you of course contain it from accessing everything it needs in life, including food. And so you need to be a little bit aware of different fertiliser needs. Now, most of my container plants I feed with one thing, and that is organic fertiliser. It's particularly good for things like citrus that need a regular and really decent feed. I use a small handful just in the top of the pot, 3 or 4 times a year, and then I'll give them a liquid feed in the warmer months a couple of times to give them an extra boost. Top dressing with a bit of compost, worm castings or leaf mould is also great as it washes into the mix and gives it a boost. And then put a bit of mulch on top to keep the goodness in. It's really important to water well when you fertilise. A weak liquid feed regularly is a great way to push growth along. So it's great for flowering displays or, of course, any of your potted vegetables. And I try and do it around once a month in the growing season, but commonly it's just when I get round to it. So, when it comes to pot plants, water is key. Watering is really one of those things you need to be really diligent about when you're growing container plants. And the smaller the container, the more often you will need to water. You need to keep that reservoir full so on a hot day, they have that moisture available. One drying out can be the death of some species. Now, heat is, of course, an obvious cause of drying out, but a light breeze will actually dry your pots out even more quickly. Moving potted plants into a sheltered spot out of the wind can help reduce transpiration. One little technique I've developed for growing some of my thirstiest potted plants is to kind of use the best of both worlds, both pots and the ground. Now, these are strawberries, which I like to grow in containers because the fruit can then hang over the edges, it keeps it clean and keeps it out of reach of things like slugs and snails. But, of course, in a container, they are much more susceptible to drying out. So what I do is I dig a little trench and I actually sick the pot about 1/3 to 1/2 in the ground. I backfill around it. And that means when I water, the water that runs out of the pot stays in the ground around it. And then on a hot, windy day, they have both insulation around the base of that pot, but also access to that moisture. It's been a really successful technique, keeping the strawberries coming for much longer than when I was growing them in containers alone. And I reckon it's a great one to use for any of your really thirsty potted plants. How you water matters, so make sure you give your plants a really good soak. Submerging the whole container in water will help, leaving it for around 30 minutes until all the air has bubbled out. With almost all potted plants, there does come a time where a little bit of extra food and diligent watering won't be enough. If you find that the leaves are dulling off and yellow, or when you water, it just rushes straight through the pot, it doesn't re-wet well, it is time to move into another container. Now, I've had this Macrut lime waiting to be potted up, and I think it's really raring to go. I'm growing this for its foliage only, not fruit, and so I'm going to put it into this slightly larger container and I'll give it a really good prune to flush out that new growth. So I've got a small amount of potting mix in the bottom here, and I'll just carefully tap this out. Oh. So those roots are actually really loose, which is quite unusual, but it means that they should shoot away well in this new pot. I'm actually going to cut this larger one away because It is starting to bend around in that container. Whenever you're handling potting mix, it's important to be careful. I'm wearing gloves, but I also moisten it down to reduce any dust coming up while I'm working with it. It's important with pots, when you go to fill them up, don't fill them right to the top with that potting mix, because what happens is the water will hit it and it'll literally just shoot over those edges and you'll lose it really quickly. Always allow at least 50 millimetres from the top of the pot to where the level surface of the potting mix ends. I am going to add just a small amount of organic fertiliser around the surface. And then I'm going to use a gravel mulch on this pot. Now, it's going to do a number of different jobs really well. I love gravel on pots. First thing is, of course, it'll cover that surface and stop evaporation, moisture straight from the top. The other thing it does is it's really fantastic when you water the pot, that jet of water from the can or the hose will hit that soil and it can end up blasting it all away. But if you've got a nice protective gravel layer, it'll hit that, it'll percolate straight through and it'll do a fantastic job of protecting those roots. So I'm just also going to take a little bit of height out of this because it had a bit of a reduced root system. It's a risk of rocking itself out in the wind. So I'll take that stem out there and tip prune that. And then I'll just give that a drink. It's going to go into a nice sheltered sunny spot and I reckon it'll be in a curry before the week is out. Of course, one of the best solutions for any potted plant problem is a new view. Look, I'm sure everyone has a neglected pot plant like this. This is a rose that I've had probably over a decade and I think it's been damaged somehow along this stem. I'm not sure why. And that means a lot of the plant has died off. It's only one side that is actually growing. Now, I could pot it into a big, clean, fresh pot and see how it goes, but I think I'm going to give it a chance in a compost-rich, sort of lovely, sunny spot in the garden and see if I can revive it that way. So the first thing I want to do is remove a bit of this damaged growth. Next thing is I've got to get it out of the pot, which is always a challenge when it's got a lip like that. You can't lip them straight out. So I'm just going to loosen right around the edge. It's actually quite wet in here, which makes me think maybe that pot isn't draining particularly well. Could have been one of the causes. Yeah, it's a tiny hole. New spot in the garden. We'll give it a new lease on life. And then even if this doesn't thrive, I can take cuttings from it, make more plants, and then this potted specimen will live to see and flower another day. But it is worth doing an audit. Every few months, work through your pots, work out what needs some attention, what might need a completely new home. You'll have much more success and your plants will thank you for it.
This tree is commonly called the golden cypress, but its botanical name is glorious. Hesperocyparis macrocarpa horizontalis aurea. Now, the two last words are good descriptive words because you can see it grows horizontally and aurea means golden, and you can see those golden tips. It's a beautiful tree, often grown in the country, but this is significant because it's an avenue of trees that lead you down into Cowes, which is on Phillip Island, and that this is just one of 119 golden cypress. And they're marvellous trees because you get a canopy, like a cathedral, as you're going through to the main part of town. And the Friends group, of which I'm patron, have done a great job because they stood up and said, don't cut these trees out just to make car parks. It's more important to have a beautiful, significant avenue going into Cowes. So have a look out for the golden cypress when you come down to Phillip Island.
Now listen, Jerry's got a nice, respectable family he wants to introduce us to. Everybody be on your best behaviour. Put a nice shirt on, stand up straight, and Jerry, I'll leave the pleasantries to you.
I'm at Roma Street Parklands in the heart of subtropical Brisbane. And the reason I'm here is because I want to share with you a fabulous family, the Apocynaceae. They have showy flowers, beautiful forms, and most important of all, they're versatile. So you'll find these dependable plants in every suburb of Australia. The Apocynaceae family has more than 5,000 species, including trees, shrubs, woody vines and herbaceous plants. Members of the family are distributed primarily in tropical and subtropical areas of the world, with some adapted to the niche of tropical dry environments. With so many species specifically adapted to the subtropics and tropics, if you're in these areas, there's bound to be an Apocynaceae to fit the needs of your garden. There's a lot of fun to be had from plant recognition, and this is what botany is based on. Now, if you look at this succulent, you'll see it's got simple linear leaves, and that indicates it's a member of the Apocynaceae family. And if you look again at the form of the plant, you can see that it started branching after it started flowering. This is something it has in common with Frangipani, and both plants are in the same family. This is growing in full sun, in freely draining soil. And if you can provide that sort of care, then almost every single member of the Apocynaceae family will grow well for you. It's not just the linear leaves that the plants all have in common, the flowers also have a similar pattern. Frangipani are perfect as an example of the flower design for the entire family. And if you look closely, you can see there are 5 petals. It's radial symmetry, and it looks a bit like a propeller. This is a standard design for the whole family's flowers. Another thing which is typical of the family is this long floral tube, and at the base, that's where they store their nectar. Frangipani have to be the best-loved members of the Apocynaceae family, and for good reason. Native to the Americas and Caribbean, Frangipanis, the genus Plumeria, have become shorthand for relaxed tropical style. The most popular type of Frangipani in landscaping currently is what's known as Singapore white, with dark green leaves, a white flower with a yellow centre. But why not expand your palette? There's only a few species in this group, but there are hundreds of different cultivars and a kaleidoscope of colours and fragrances. At sunset, they switch on their fragrance. It becomes stronger, and that's deliberately to lure moths to act as pollinators. Frangipanis are most commonly grown from cuttings, as they're very easy to propagate. This also ensures a clone of the mother plant's floral character. Cuttings are typically taken as whole fleshy branches, and then the branches are left to dry out in the air and form a callus over the wound. This is done in winter. These are then planted in the ground where the callus can then form roots. Best of all, you get shade in summer and they're deciduous in winter. What more could you want from a small tree? I'm sitting next to a Tabernae montana, and usually with this plant, your nose will lead you to it because they have a beautiful fragrance. Normally you'll see Tabernae montana grown as a freestanding shrub, but you can see how beautifully this plant forms a clipped hedge. The variegated form is one, and over there is a small leaf form which makes an even tighter, crisper hedge. Not all Apocynaceae are from the wet tropics. Some have evolved to endure not only high temperatures, but long periods of dry. Pachypodium baronii hails from Madagascar, where it's very hot and very dry. This fascinating plant is prized by collectors and looks like nothing else. It has a swollen trunk like a rainwater tank and has the ability to rapidly absorb water at the start of the rainy season. When you look closely to the trunk, all the thorns come out in groups of 3. When there's a bit of moisture in the air, these thorns may help direct the water into the root zone of the plant so it can fully take advantage of any moisture available. Adeniums are commonly known as desert roses. They can grow to 2 metres in height and look like fat, ancient baobab trees rendered in miniature. They love the tropics, provided they're not getting too much water and start to rot. Unlike baobabs, they produce huge, showy flowers, hence the common name. Star jasmine is one of the stars of this family. It's a climber, so it can be grown in hanging baskets, up trees, up walls, and as a ground cover. The species have beautifully fragrant flowers. This, however, doesn't have many flowers, and it makes up for this by having this wonderful range of colours. Now, this is something which it has all year round, and I think that makes up for the lack of blooms. As a plant, it's tough. It doesn't like frost that much, but it'll tolerate drought, and it rarely gets pests or diseases. So this really is a winner. Another thing that this plant has in common with the whole family is that the sap can be irritating to your skin, and sometimes they're toxic as well. So if you're working with these plants, wash any sap off your skin and wear gloves. And while you'll readily identify the shape of this alamander's gorgeous yellow flowers, bear in mind they're fine to grow from Sydney to Brisbane, but in far north Queensland, they can be weedy. You're probably familiar with some Apocynaceae plants already. These showy, versatile, resilient plants are popular for a very good reason. Now you've met the family, why not bring some home for your own garden?
Time to clear your schedule. There's gardening to be done. It's your jobs for the weekend, and they're not waiting around. In cool areas, delphiniums will grow to towering heights, so install a support system now to stop them falling over. Circular grow hoops or stakes with soft ties will do the job. Sow corn kernels into furrows about 10 centimetres deep to protect them from wind as they germinate. Remember to plant in a square formation for best pollination. Raise the stakes of your tomato yield. Remove lower and lateral shoots on indeterminate varieties to push energy to the growing tips and give the plant height. In warm areas, get dahlia tubers going. Pick a spot with morning sun, plant halfway into the soil and water well. Leave soil to dry until shoots reach 15 centimetres tall, then water regularly. It's time for an annual prune of your camellias. Remove untidy branches and give it a light clip all around for shape. Aim for eye level so you can enjoy next season's blooms. Plant fuchsias in the garden or in hanging baskets to show off their pendulous sepals. Keep protected from hot arvo sun and keep soil moist as they establish. In subtropical areas, ensure young trees grow sturdy trunks by letting them sway. Support them by loosely tying Hessian straps to 3 stakes set in a triangle formation around the tree. Tahitian limes prefer moderate moisture, so you might need to water them on dry days. Make sure they're hydrated before applying their yearly dose of bone meal. Keep hibiscus happy with sulphate of potash and a spray of fish emulsion. Pick up spent flowers and keep mulch away from the trunk to avoid cholera. In tropical areas with big rains come unwanted pests like snails, so manage populations now before they take over. Deter with copper tape or trap in upturned pots. Be persistent in picking edible plants as soon as they're ready, as humidity can hamper airflow and lead to fungal disease or spoilage. Eat up and share around. When harvesting from homegrown citrus trees, save the seed and soak overnight. Select seeds that sink, sow into free-draining mix and keep moist as they grow. In arid areas, jicama is a crunchy root crop that can be planted now for winter harvest. Plant tubers about 30 centimetres apart in compacted soil and pop in a trellis to climb on. Bush bananas will appreciate a good drink as they begin to set fruit. All parts of this vine can be eaten, including the flowers, leaves and the tasty tuber root. Sun-loving gerberas are best in bloom now. Apply a control-release fertiliser and water deeply once a week. Cutting flowers to enjoy indoors will encourage more. Enjoy the last weekend of spring. There's so much happening on our social media accounts, so be sure to follow and get involved. Next week, we have something really special for you. Tammy and I are heading to Indonesia. It's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet and home to 10% of the world's flora. We're so excited to introduce you to some wonderful people and explore their gardens. We thought we'd give you a sneak peek by taking you to the island of Java to meet an architect and nursery grower. Enjoy!
I am a person who loves nature, and through my experience by climbing the mountain cross-country, I learned so much. I see a lot of plants that I would like to bring it to my garden, the ambience. I designed the garden to make this not only comfortable for the eyes, but also for the soul. I'm Karen Tambayong. I'm a grower. We are in my nursery, Nursery Floribunda, in West Java, on the foot of Mount Gede and Pangrango. The climate is cool because we are 1,200 above sea level, and it's very good for the plants and the flowers. I love plants, so that is, of course, in the family already. My father actually first owned this garden. My dad was a grower too, so I asked him to take over. I start growing tropical plants because here in Indonesia, we have so many different types of plants and nobody really understands about our own plants. So I start little by little growing this plant in my garden. Like Copsia is the origin of Java, and it's less known. This orchid is Vanda tricolor from Mount Gede Pangrango, but you can also find these orchids in Mount Merapi in Central Java. This is Medinilla speciosa that is native to this region and also to Central Java. They like the cool condition like this, so not many places in Indonesia that have this type of condition. and this is one of my favorite plants. Flower is my passion. Because my love of the flower, I want to know how to grow. That's why I become the grower. But I took also courses for flower arrangement. With my background in architecture, I understand about aesthetica, combination, color combination, I know. We did the flower arrangement for the presidential palace for 20 years. So we did that, and I also mastered the Indonesian native flowers and also leaves. So that is actually our strength. Today, we need more green. Today, we need more gardens. This place is a refuge for me, and actually not only for me, for my whole family and my friends, because from the busy Jakarta, we come to this place, it's more like Eden for us. You know, all this greenery and all the flowers, it's combined together and make people comfortable to be here and also make people happy. Garden is not just garden. Garden is a need for the soul.
Well, if you enjoyed that, you are gonna love next week. Take a look. We get lost in some inspiring home gardens. Meet a family of plant breeders looking to cultivate Indonesia's next big thing.
What are your thoughts?
And travel to the jungles of Sumatra to see some of the most amazing plants on Earth and meet the people working to protect them.
Nature not depend on people, but people depend on nature.